What does it take to remove the barriers that stand between a child and an education? For some, it begins in policy. For others, in philanthropy. For her, it began in a disciplined home in Duncan's Trelawney. My guest today is Mrs. Taneshia Stoney Dryden, Chief Executive Officer of Crystal House, Jamaica. I'm Archibald Gordon. This is Profile. Taneshia Dryden, welcome to Profile.
Thank you for having me, Archie.
And I should have said Stoney Dryden because that's your nickname. I'm going to get to that nickname in a minute, but I want to place you in context for some of our viewers who may not be as familiar with your work. So you're the head of Crystal House Jamaica, which is a no-fee school that goes beyond being just a school. So you provide transportation, meals, psychosocial help, I would say, as well as other types of assistance to the students in the communities. It's a discussion all by itself. But that work has been preceded by work at some of other agencies which have done this, similar kind of work, in a sense, philanthropic work.
Yes.
With the United Way of Jamaica, where you're Chief Executive Officer, before the Multicare Youth Foundation, before that the Jamaica Social Investment Fund, JSIF, and I'm stint as well at the Ministry of Education before. And the background of all of this is sociology and social work at the University of the West Indies. So you hear all of this work that you have been doing. How do you feel? What do you think?
I feel as though I'm paying homage to my grandmother, who I know was not a social worker, a studied social worker, but really did a lot of community and philanthropic work.
Let's talk about the grandmother then. So the context of this is that you were raised by your paternal grandparents. So this is your father's grandparents in Trelawney.
Yes.
How come?
So at about 2 years of age, I was taken from my mom. We were living in a little district in Riversdale, Bogwalk, and at about 5, we moved from Bogwalk to Duncan's Trelawney with my grandparents.
Why did your mother move you from?
I think my mother was a teenage mom, 18 years old with 2 children, and there is so much and so more an 18-year-old can do with 2 children. My grandparents were kind enough, after raising 8 children of their own, to now raise 5 grandchildren. My grandfather was a disciplinarian, but there was such a softer side to him raising us. I said my grandmother, I always say my grandmother had an art of making all of us feeling as though we were special and you were the favorite. My cousins and I, we would tell of stories as to why we would be the favorite. I can remember on a Sunday when she's making Sunday dinner, I would be called, before the dinner is ready and behind the fridge eating the first chicken leg, But then my cousins will tell me another story of how grandma treated them, with favoritism, and we'll all have some debate as to who was the favorite.
So it was that, but also what she treated you like. What was she like?
Her nickname was Love. I grew up hearing a lot of persons calling her Aunt Love. So it was a loving environment. Stickler for education, we had a big dining room table. That table was a classroom. A lot of homework, projects, assignments. But I can also remember that table being cleared for us to play dominoes, Scrabble, which is my favorite, Scrabble, and Chinese checkers and cards. So from early on, Archie, I knew how to balance play and work. And I also knew how to balance a lot of other things, multitasking.
Because that was what you were seeing around you.
Yes.
What was she saying about education apart from what she was doing? Was she also talking about it?
She was talking about it. I'm from a family of education as well. I have aunts who are educators. My grandmother was a postmistress in Duncan's Trelawney. But she was always treating the house like a classroom. I remember days when I would go home for lunch from Duncan's All Age, and there were 5 or 6 other children coming with me for lunch. Assignments being done, homework being done, not just for me, but for my siblings and my cousins. So, yeah.
So that was a grandmother. You said the grandfather was very strict.
He was.
The context of the grandfather is that he was, he had returned from war.
Yes, yes. He served as he fought in, I think, World War II. He came back with that disciplinarian kind of feeling. I can remember particularly one Sunday when we weren't ready for church, and he was, I think, preaching at church that Sunday, and he left us. We had to walk about 2-3 miles to Duncan's Methodist Church from Kettering Bottom all the way to Duncan's Methodist Church. It was a long walk.
So you had to be a stickler for time. You had to be doing what you needed to be doing in a certain kind of way.
Yes, yes.
But also very loving at the same time.
Also very loving. My brother, who sometimes wouldn't listen, he rode his bicycle out one Sunday. And I think there was some accident, and my grandfather folded the newspaper, and like the Rock of Gibraltar, he wasn't moving to go and see what was happening to Damai. But in the night, I caught him crying, because he felt for what happened to my brother. So a very loving father figure he was, an empath of the sort, but still a disciplinarian at heart.
So this is the family context. What is the community like?
The community of Duncan's is a small community, very close-knitted community. My grandmother was the heart of that community. I would watch sometimes her giving of herself, giving her very last to community members. And sometimes my grandfather would protest, but she would sneak to the side of the fence and give meals or give household items, toiletries to other community members.
I'm always very interested in how sort of seeing that kind of example dovetails over time with what you end up actually doing. When you reflect on that now, do you also see that?
Yes, I also see kindness being a part of how I lead. I also see leading with empathy as well, and just ensuring that at the heart of everything I do, people is at the center.
And I want to talk not just about that, but also how some of these sort of qualities and perspectives developed as a consequence of the school life. But we have to take our first break on Profile. My guest is Taneshia Stoney Dryden. Now, we haven't come to the Stoney yet, the Chief Executive Officer of Crystal House Jamaica. We're back with you after these messages. Welcome back to Profile. We are speaking with Taneshia Stoney Dryden, who is Chief Executive Officer of Crystal House Jamaica. By the way, Stoney.
Yes.
Where the middle name come from? Or is that a pet name? What do you call a pet name?
It's my father's name. It's actually my maiden name. Okay. I've always been Little Miss Stoney. Even I remember when I went to Irving Hall to board, they were contemplating like
this.
University of the West Indies. This should just be your hall name, Stoney. Even when I did a short stint selecting on a sound system, and I was stone cold. So it has always been Stoney. I have friends now that would say Stoney is a brand. Yeah.
All right, so that is the source of Stoney. So let's go back to the origin story now. To first, Duncan's All Age.
Yes.
What were you as a student, as a child?
An overachiever. I always wanted to come first in class. So my classmates looking on must be saying, we could only tie with Stoney. You could either, 2 persons are going to come first. So I was a teacher's pet of the sort. I enjoyed my years at Duncan's All Age.
And you were doing everything as well?
Doing everything at Duncan's All Age. And that's transitioning at St. Hugh's High as well.
What is this?
Sports, academia, everything Archibald, I was in it. And the same happened when I went to St. Hugh's. I was in debating society, student council, drama president, prefect, you know, everything. When I went to UWI, I was doing long jump. I played football. You know?
You did absolutely everything, all of
everything.
All right, well, all right. Let's separate them first. Before you went to St. Hugh's, a short stint as well. I call it Jippy Jappa. I'm always calling it by the hat. But this is Westwood.
Yes.
The Westwood High School.
The Westwood. So I did common entrance, and I passed for Westwood High. I went to St. Hugh's because my aunt taught at St. Hugh's, and she had 2 daughters who were going to St. Hugh's. I remember having the conversation with my grandmother because I now know that it's called inclusivity. Didn't know there was a name for it then, but you were always a part of the decision in the family. So there was a conversation, and I was happy to leave from Westwood and attend St. Hugh's.
But now you're leaving from what we call it the country to town experience
Yes.
now.
Yes.
So talk to me about the country to town experience.
Country to town experience. So
this is Spanish Town, by the way. You went to school in Kingston, but actually lived in Spanish Town.
Lived in Spanish Town from 1996. I never thought I grew up poor, you know, but when I came to live in Spanish Town, that's when I realized that all these nice dandan and these fancy things that I thought were brand new were actually hand-me-downs from my cousins. And I always say that poverty is relative and it's also subjective, because growing up, I never thought I was...
You would have been short of anything.
Anything. It's it's probably a humble beginning. I oftentimes say from board floor to boardroom, jokingly. But, you know, Spanish Town was an eye-opener for me. St. Hugh's was an eye-opener for me. The girls were different. They were more bold. I think St. Hugh's also taught me how to advocate, how to be an advocate for things. St. Hugh's is where I saw myself as a leader. Seeing teachers, women teachers who were leaders. That's where my eyes, you know, were opened to women being leaders.
How would they... explain a little bit more about you, mean.
In the sense that I saw women leading with compassion. I saw women leading, being themselves, being their authentic selves. Miss Gail, who was a history teacher of mine, I remember Miss Gail always giving me lunch, always ensuring that I was supported, I was guided. And not just Miss Gail, there were other teachers who took a vested interest in me. I remember when I started skipping classes, and there was one teacher, Miss Pusey, who would say...
Jump classes, skipping classes. Because remember, you're the one who is doing everything.
Yes,
so
yes.
How are you skipping classes? Because you're... How you get to skipping classes mentally?
I don't know. I think at some point I started moving with a set of girls, and we would hide behind the building. But Miss Pusey would shout from the top floor and say, "Stoney, only criminals lurk behind buildings." And it was just a phase, Archie. I didn't think it lasted long.
So from that note, you said you saw women advocating, you saw a sort of different type of leadership. It was not you weren't seeing this, but you were probably seeing this in much more of a concentrated environment, so to speak.
Yes.
So it really sort of stands out. You now have to make the decision about going on to what you're going to do next, and you decide the University of the West Indies? And
funny, it was a teacher who assisted me in completing that application form, and a teacher who... Archibald, I think students first fall in love with their teachers and not so much the subject. So I was in love with my sociology teacher, and she assisted me in completing the form. So sociology and psychology became my first choice to go in university.
So sociology now, for the non-soci people, is kind of like what it's a study of people?
Study of people, study of society. While psychology is a study of self and mind, sociology is a study of people and agencies in society, study of structures and schools, and yeah.
From being born in Riversdale to Trelawney to Spanish Town to Kingston
Yes.
to now being on campus, and that's a completely different experience in and of itself.
Different experience, but a very fulfilling one. Being on campus, you become an all-rounder, especially if you reside on campus. I'm barely 5 feet, and maybe 5'1" or so, but I did long jump. I played football. I was a midfielder. I took part in Culturama. I was always on stage at UWI, and that's when the term of Shakespeare with the world being a stage, that's where everything just comes full circle. But UWI was...
I'm gonna delve into the UWI experience a little bit more, but we have to take our second break on Profile. My guest is Taneshia Stoney Dryden. Stoney Dryden, CEO of Crystal House, Jamaica. We're back with you after these messages. Welcome back to Profile. We are speaking with Taneshia Stoney Dryden, who is Chief Executive Officer of Crystal House Jamaica, which is a no-fee school. We soon get to Crystal House. But at this point now, we're at the University of the West Indies. You said you lived on Irving Hall.
Yes.
As we call it, the Hall of Halls. But that's a biased thing from me. I lived on more than one hall. Irving Hall as well as Taylor Hall. And you're participating in everything. You say even long... First of all, explain the long jump thing to me, because I'm not understanding. It's 5'5". 5'1".
Yes. I was block representative for the Block F, Falcon Fighters. And for something in me said lead by example. So we're having sports day, and I said I'm going to do everything that I can do. So I ended up doing long jumping. I ended up doing sprint and, long distance running, none of which I trained for, by the way, but just the ethos of leading by example resonated with me from early.
Is the University of West Indies in this sort of, you love sociology because of the teacher?
Yes, sir.
Is this sociology and social work also resonating with you as well?
I also had teachers or lecturers who I looked up to, lecturers who made you love the subject. There was one lecturer who always started off his classes asking, what is happening in the world? What is happening in Jamaica? What is happening with you? What can you change in the world? What can you change in Jamaica? What can you change it with you? So those lecturers, somehow, some will leave a mark on you. And with lecturers like Dr. Taylor and other Heather Ricketts, Professor Heather Ricketts, you fell in love with the teacher and the subject all over again.
So how is this also sort of helping you understand at all what you're seeing around you? What's happening where you grew up, where you moved to, some of the things? How is all of this helping you understand that better?
I was able to connect the dots with my lived experience, growing up from a humble beginning, knowing that education is the vehicle for upward social economic mobility, and now being placed at Crystal House Jamaica, whereas that is the vehicle that we're using to say we're going to be changing the lives of these 474 children. So somehow my journey, I want to think it was planned or orchestrated that way, to somehow growing up with grandparents who focused on education to now being in an institution where education is the tool for social change. So
that is Crystal House. That journey also began by, as it would turn out, as it turns out, at the Ministry of Education. But before we even get to that, is it that the sociology and the social policy was a consequence of the teacher, not because this was necessarily something that you had in your mind? What did you want to do?
I always wanted to do journalism. I always wanted to be on radio or TV. But I love it. I loved sociology, and I also loved social work. I loved working with families and to see that change in the families. My being at Jamaica Social Investment Fund, one of my first project was a project where I was a social worker. I worked with 30 families in the parishes of Portland, St. Thomas, and Trelawney. Positive bias towards Trelawney, of course, but yes.
But before you even got to JSIF, I want to go back to JSIF in a second. You were at the Ministry of Education.
Ministry of Education.
Doing research.
Doing research. The research that I was doing, it was at a time when education was taking a shift. We were moving away from comprehensive schools to having standard high schools. And I was a part of the team that did the field work, interviewed the principals, parents, teachers, students, doing the data collection and the data analysis. And then I was also brought onto the team when we were making a move, trying to eliminate the shift system and trying to see how we can have that regular work, regular operation of a high school.
So that was the shift system that was being changed, and
yes.
The entire thing required just kind of figuring out what kind of facilities you would need. What
yes.
were some of the things that...
What kind of facilities? What would the curriculum look like? What are the necessary skills that the teachers would require? So it's just getting the information from the actual participants themselves. So I would sit with principals, I would sit with teachers, even students themselves and parents, and asking some questions and entering that data. I was also a part of the data analysis team, and yeah, good work.
So people, what are some of the things that people are saying? How revealing was that? As someone had been a part of the system, but had not necessarily examined it from like a data perspective.
Like
you have your own data,
yes.
because you live it, but now you're hearing from people.
People were willing. They were willing to share. They were willing to try something new in the education system. So what I was hearing from them is a willingness and a confidence in the Ministry of Education to say whatever it is that they decide, we will be a part of it. So I think at the time, and now still, they have a lot of confidence in the Ministry of Education and the decisions that are made, and to know that those decisions are in the best interest of not only the students, but also the teachers and the parents.
This is the first of a two-part series that we're going to be doing with you, but I want to know before we close this portion, how that information now sort of shapes your understanding of the sector that is the sector you work in.
As head of entity, I have one-on-ones, O3s with teachers. I listen and I try my best to meet my teachers halfway. There is some middle ground. There is some consensus.
You understand that there is not just to learn from them, but to learn from all of the stakeholders.
Yes.
So interesting to me how all of these different kinds of experiences lead to the other place. That is going to bring us to the end of part one of our two-part series with you. But how does all of this lead to the Jamaica Social Investment Fund, the Multicare Youth Foundation, being a donor, as she told me in the pre-interview, the chief beggar, and then now running an international organization with a local base in Jamaica? That's it for this week Profile. You have to tune in next week to hear part two of my conversation with Taneshia Stoney Dryden. I'm Archibald Gordon. See you next time.